All right. Welcome in, everybody, to the Go 24/7 podcast. I'm your senior writer at the site, Glen West. We got some breaking news to break down for you today. Frank Wilson is off to Ole Miss. He's going to be hired by the Rebels after the LSU Bowl game here on December the 27th. So we're going to break it all down for you here over the next 15, 20 minutes. Just wanted to kind of give my thoughts on where LSU goes from here, what Frank's departure means for LSU going forward, how they kind of, I guess, make up for that loss in recruiting, and then just kind of where what all this kind of points to here for the future of LSU and their running backs coach position. So before we get into all that, would just like to ask you guys, please, if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button. Please leave us a comment. Please help us out with, hit the like button with anything you can do to help us out there. Then if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please give us a follow over there as well. Give us a comment or two as well. Always helps us out as we try to grow out this network and try to reach as many LSU fans as possible. So, with that being said, Matt Zenitz over at CBS Sports, our colleagues over at CBS Sports, reported on Tuesday evening that Frank Wilson will indeed be the new coach, one of the new hires for Ole Miss head coach Pete Golding. They're going to be bringing Frank Wilson in. That reunites Golding and Wilson. Wilson actually hired Pete Golding as his defensive coordinator when he took the UTSA job back in 2016. He has some experience coaching at Ole Miss from, I believe, it was 2005 to 2007 when he last worked for the Rebels. So very early on in his coaching career, before he even had his first stint at LSU. So it's certainly a move that I think you could probably see the tea leaves coming in terms of, Frank Wilson not being retained by Lane Kiffin. We've spoken about it some, just kind of our, hesitancy to really lean into the possibility that he would be back. I think if that was something that Lane Kiffin really wanted, they would have made happen pretty soon after he was hired, a couple weeks ago now. So this decision was made. It was originally supposed to be held off until after the LSU bowl game, but obviously Ole Miss and Pete Golding made their run and are now going to bring in a really talented coach, a guy who knows this state and certainly the New Orleans area very well. I do think we should probably start off by just talking about, kind of Frank's, what Frank leaving means for LSU. I think you can split it up into a running backs perspective and then certainly a recruiting perspective. From the recruiting perspective, this is a loss. I mean, like you wanted, if you were LSU, you want to have roots, I think, in Louisiana and in New Orleans, and there's nobody that has better relationships than Frank Wilson from a high school recruiting perspective. Here in the state, he's gone out and gotten you some really fine players. He's done a really nice job. Recently as his past class and being significant parts of why Richard Anderson and Lamar Brown ended up signing with you. He was very big piece in those recruitments for LSU. He's obviously has a tremendous track record over the last 10 to 15 years in the high school recruiting ranks. But I think the bigger point here that you can probably take away, and probably something that Lane Kiffin was weighing as he was making this decision, was how much do these relationships truly mean in this day and age? And if you know anything about Lane Kiffin and the success that he's had over the last 5 to 6 years, it's been predominantly based on his success in the transfer portal and him weighing the transfer portal players over high school recruiting. I mean, that's just the way that it's been at Ole Miss for the last 5 to 6 years. And maybe that was because, he knew at Ole Miss he couldn't recruit the kind of high school talent that would be able to immediately come in and contribute the way that, a guy with 2 and 3 years of starting experience would be able to come in and do. But in that same vein, in that same line of thinking, he also learned that, when he has his evaluations correct and when they hit on a lot of those players, that you can have immediate success. You can have immediate turnover from year to year and get this thing and get a winning program developed very, very quickly. And so I do think the big question that Kiffin kind of was asking himself was, does he want to keep a guy in Frank Wilson who has all these recruiting ties and has all these relationships in the state of Louisiana and in New Orleans, uh, continue being the running backs coach and your associate head coach, your recruiting coordinator, or does he want to bring his guy in? And I think that answer was very, very clear from the very early days that Lane Kiffin had the job. Kevin Smith is the Ole Miss running backs coach for right now as they go through this playoff run. The expectation, is has been that Kevin Smith would follow Lane Kiffin to Ole Miss. He was from Ole Miss. He was not on the plane that brought a bunch of those coaches with Kiffin to Baton Rouge when he was first hired. But it's been reported out there that his wife and his kid were at the LSU introductory press conference of Lane Kiffin a couple weeks ago, and they were doing a lot of the same things that that Kiffin and his family were doing in the weeks prior to taking the LSU job. So there's some tea leaves there that make this a lot of sense. I'm going to dive more into the Kevin Smith angle of this a little later, but I did just kind of want to get on here and talk a little bit about Frank and the relationships that he has in New Orleans and it's just in Louisiana in general. I've gone back and forth with a lot of you guys on our board. Like I do think that letting Frank go is a mistake. I think that they're, but that also doesn't mean that it can't work with Kevin Smith or with whoever is brought in as the next running backs coach. I just think from a recruiting perspective, what you have with Frank Wilson. And you're not going to land all of them. Like, Jakeem Stewart last year is a perfect example. He got a massive amount of money to go to USC, and LSU was aggressive with their offer, but it was just not what USC was giving him. And so you have cases on both sides, right? You have Jakeem Stewart on one hand, but you also have Lamar Brown and Richard Anderson on another hand. And I think that they're the big thing that Lane Kiffin and LSU really have to lock in and try to find now are guys that can go and recruit this state and recruit offensive players in the state, in Louisiana and in New Orleans, and find guys that can go recruit at that level at the high school ranks. Because I do think one of the most appealing parts about this job is that home base that you have. I mean, he didn't have that at Ole Miss. Ole Miss, Mississippi puts out really good players. Not all of them want to stay in Mississippi and play for the Rebels or the competition that they have at Mississippi State. Here in Louisiana, LSU, this state puts out tremendous athletes year in and year out, and all of those guys grow up wanting to play at LSU because that's just the way they've been able to build their brand here over the last 2 decades, and it's been one of the the highlight reasons why you've won championships at the levels that you have over the last 20 years. But times are changing. Times are changing at the same time, and I think from a transfer portal perspective, that is certainly where I think Kiffin sees his bread being buttered the most here. Even when he comes and makes this decision to go to LSU, I think he's going to value those players and those type of evaluations, over a high school, player. And so, we'll see if that strategy works at LSU. It's obviously worked for him really well at Ole Miss, and they've won a lot of games there the last several years. They've got their teams on the precipice now of the college football playoff, and looking to make a deep run in the playoff for a potential championship. But I do think that the big crux of the conversation here was, do I bring in my guy, the guy that I've worked with for 10 years, in Kevin Smith, who I know and who knows my system and knows how to go out there and recruit really good players as well. Case in point, Keywan Lacey here. This last year, he's turned into an All SEC player, All American kind of caliber guy. If he comes back next year and plays in college, which he will have to because he's a sophomore, but one of the bright young running backs in the country that they've been able to develop here over this last year. Or did you want to pull out of your stops to keep Frank Wilson? And obviously, Kiffin made the decision here that he values what Kevin Smith does above all else. And but I do think it's extremely important now for LSU to have a plan of having some, whether it's analysts or recruiting personnel staff, whatever you got to do, you've got to have some kind of balance now, I think, from a recruiting perspective, that you're going to be missing with Frank Wilson. Because look, I'm not going to sit here and say that Ole Miss is going to come in and take the best players out of New Orleans or out of Louisiana, year in and year out now going forward because Frank Wilson's over at Ole Miss. But I will say they will make it tricky. They'll make it difficult on LSU to keep those players in the state. They'll make their best run at them, and they'll probably get a couple, and LSU will have to fight off for a lot of the really great talent here in the state, I think. But I do think at the end of the day, like, the LSU brand, LSU football program, these players, they want, when LSU comes calling, and in the state in particular, it's very hard for these players and these young high school prospects to say no, and so they have an opportunity here to still accomplish all that they want to from a transfer portal perspective and from an evaluation perspective, by bringing Lane Kiffin and Billy Glasscock, the new general manager, in here. But they also have to, I think, marriage that with strong Louisiana recruiting ties. And so that's going to be, I think, where Blake Baker comes in, where Corey Raymond comes in, some of these defensive staff members that have been around Louisiana now for several years and recruited at this state level. Those relationships are going to be extremely important. It's going to be extremely important over the next year for Kiffin himself and Glasscock and some of these personnel people that they're bringing in from a recruiting perspective to build those relationships as well. And certainly the offensive staff that they're bringing along with them has been proven to be one of the best staffs around all of college football on the offensive side of the ball. Those coaches are going to have to start building relationships in New Orleans and in Louisiana and across the state as well. So because there are so many good players that are still coming up here, you just look at the 2027 class alone. You've got several players in the top 50, top 100 that are from Louisiana, that are from Baton Rouge, from up in the Ruston area, where you've got Ahmad Bro and not Ahmad Bro, Ahmad Hudson and Jaden Anding and several players like that. You've got guys still down in New Orleans that are really doing a great job. Miguel Whiteley, the wide receiver out of St. Aug. You've got a lot of really good players still down there in New Orleans, and certainly here in Baton Rouge as well, that you're going to want to recruit and try to get to LSU, because we know that the best LSU teams have always had that balance, right, of really solid returning players, but also those up and coming Louisiana players that have always been kind of at the heart of this program. And so that's what you lose, I think, with Frank Wilson a little bit, but that doesn't mean that it can't be overcome, because building rosters this day and age is so year to year. And Lane Kiffin has proven over the last 4 or 5 years that he can do it with the best in the country, in terms of building rosters with the resources that he has. And he should have more resources now at LSU going forward. And I think you'll start to see that here when the portal opens up on January 2nd. So that's just a couple of my thoughts on Frank. I think from, just to kind of surmise what I was talking about there, I think I probably bounced around a little bit, but I think you lose something with Wilson from a recruiting perspective. Guys on our board, people that I've gone back and forth with, you talk a little bit about the running back room and just how that hasn't performed to the level that they've really needed to here at LSU over the last couple of years. I think that's a valid argument, but I also think that that's just one symptom of a bigger problem here for the LSU offense that you brought Lane Kiffin in here to address. And so I would have liked, in an ideal world, to have seen what Frank Wilson in a Lane Kiffin offense and a Lane Kiffin system could have done with some of these running backs. But, that was the decision that you paid Kiffin $14 million a year to make. And, I think now, all your attention turns to what happens next at that position room for LSU. And I think all signs are going to point to Kevin Smith. Like, I think with this first domino falling for Frank Wilson and him heading over to Ole Miss, that now, takes away a position, coaching spot from Smith to potentially return to Oxford. There are certainly other programs out there that I'm sure are watching what Kewan Lacey is doing this year at Ole Miss and could make a serious run at Kevin Smith. But I also think that LSU is going to be prepared to make a serious commitment to Kevin Smith to make sure that he can get on board with LSU and that he can reunite with Kiffin here in Baton Rouge, and that they can rebuild that running back room from really from the studs. Because now with Wilson off to Ole Miss, these questions now revolve around: does Harlan Berry stay? Does Caden Durham stay? Those are two players here, two running backs that are very, very close with Wilson and are big reasons why. And Wilson is big reasons why that they are here at LSU, and so does one of them maybe follow, Frank to Ole Miss? Does the other hop in the portal? Does LSU convince one of them to stay? Like, I think there's still some very interesting conversations that need to be had from a personnel perspective in the running back room over the next couple of weeks. And so, where LSU turns in terms of the portal, I think you're probably looking at a minimum 2 additions. And depending on what happens over the next couple of weeks with guys like Barry and guys like Durham, you could potentially be looking for 3 or 4, depending on what happens with those situations. And so it's very important that LSU gets this position coach in here very quickly, and all signs do point to that being Kevin Smith. And then that kind of plays the trickle down effect, right? If you're able to get Kevin Smith to Baton Rouge, like Lane Kiffin has been pushing for, that decision from Smith is probably going to be officially announced after Ole Miss's run through the college football playoff is over. That could be as quickly as this weekend when they play Tulane at home, or it could drag into the early part of the new year when they've got to go play the Sugar Bowl against Georgia if they win this first round game. So, that decision could certainly be another week or two from being officially announced. But I think the bigger question here for LSU is just, okay, if they get Smith on board, will Lacey follow? And Lacey, for those who are living under a rock, has been one of the best running backs probably in the country this year. He's rushed for over 1,300 yards. He's got 20 rushing touchdowns. He's been a huge, huge central piece to this Ole Miss offense in 2025, and a big reason why they've continued to be a top 5 offense and why they're in the playoff right now. And so he's a central piece to their puzzle. They brought him from Missouri, where he did not have a whole ton of opportunities as a true freshman, and they brought him here. They aced that evaluation, and they were able to find a superstar running back to kind of run their offense, or be a significant piece to their offense. And so that is the ideal scenario here for LSU. With losing Wilson, as much as some of us might not like it, or others might be okay with it, at the end of the day, the best thing that LSU can now do going forward is to hit on Kevin Smith and bring him here to Baton Rouge, and then have that trickle down effect with Lacey also following Kevin Smith to Baton Rouge as well. I do think that relationship between Kevin Smith and Kewan Lacey is very, very strong, and is going to be something that Lacey really considers when he, inevitably has to address his future. He was asked about that earlier this week as well at an Ole Miss press conference as they're getting ready for their playoff game this weekend. And he basically talked about, he still has his coach, through all of the turmoil and all of the coaching changes that have kind of undergone Ole Miss here over the last, several weeks. Smith has kind of stayed there. He's, been able to continue his routine and not be really affected by the Kiffin departure, because I do think that relationship between Kevin Smith and Kewan Lacey is probably the biggest reason why Lacey would follow Smith to Baton Rouge. And so it's going to be very interesting discussions there as well. I'm sure if Lacey is going to be entering the portal, there's going to be many, many schools that are going to make aggressive pushes for him. LSU will be one of them. And if Smith is here in Baton Rouge, that certainly gives LSU a leg up, I would think, of him staying with his coaches, with the guys that developed him, with the guys that took chances on him. And that solves a lot in your running back room. Now, you still have to go back and you'd have to backfill that room Lacey's going to be your bell cow if in that situation, and if that plays out. But it's certainly going to also have to include, several guys. Whether it's young players that you're able to bring in from the portal, or veterans that have some more experience that can complement what Lacey can do. And then if you're able to retain Barry or Durham in this offense as well, that is very encouraging, because I do think both of those guys are good players who could do really good things in this kind of offensive structure. So, we'll see kind of what happens there. There is a structure in place at Ole Miss right now that is very familiar for guys like Frank Wilson. And, you've got Austin Thomas, who has been the expected hire over at Ole Miss now for a little bit. Kelvin Bolden, who's a personnel guy who was with LSU this last year, is also now back at Ole Miss. So they're doing a lot of switcheroos right now with LSU and the Ole Miss staff, and both on the coaching side, certainly on the recruiting side with the players that LSU was able to bring in this 2026 class, and I would imagine from a transfer portal perspective, there will also be some switching back and forth between players as well, with all this news coming out over the last week or two, with these coaches kind of switching schools and switching places. So that's pretty much all we got for you today. I did kind of want to touch on, just to kind of close, one minor thing that we picked up on. Whit Weeks, the linebacker, junior linebacker, was on a podcast with Get Gordon as part of their branding or NIL deals that they've done. He and his brothers were on a podcast with John Gordon McKernan Jr., who was basically asking Whit, essentially questions about his future, and still pretty non-committal from Whit Weeks in terms of his future and what he's deciding right now. He's going through that process. He's talking to a lot of people. He said that there are some that want him to stay. There are some that want him to go to the next level and start his pro career. Just my own personal read of the situation, I think there's a lot of factors here that LSU should feel good about being able to retain Whit Weeks. I think it's going to be obviously his decision in the end, but I think anything that just looking at his draft prospects right now, I think at best he's a day 3 guy, a 4th, 5th, 6th round pick. And anything else you can offer in NIL can be comparable to that from a compensation standpoint. I think certainly the idea that he gets to come back for a senior year, be a team leader, maybe don that number 18 jersey or something like that, be one of the centerpieces of a team that LSU is going to be expecting to compete next year under Lane Kiffin with the kind of resources that they have. So keeping a guy like Whit Weeks as one of your centerpieces on defense, having that Blake Baker relationship still intact with him being back for your defensive coordinator spot, I think that helps a lot. Whit Weeks and really the Weeks family and Baker are very, very close. You get to play with your younger brother Zach for another year as well in that situation. I think that there's a lot of factors here that are positive for LSU to be able to hold on to a player like Whit Weeks. Now, of course, the negative is, he could be saying, if I get hurt again, then, I really, really mess up my opportunities to be a good NFL draft prospect. And it's a fair assessment to have as a player internally. But I do think LSU and the pitches that they can make, the kind of money they can offer Whit Weeks to come back and to continue playing with his brother, continue playing with Blake Baker, and continue this ascent for this defense. I mean, look, this defense, when Whit Weeks arrived, it was outside of the top 100 in a lot of categories, and he has been a big part of that buildup the last couple of years of making it, a defense that is not only respectable but capable of being a playoff kind of defense. And the marriage that top 25 defense that LSU just had this year with what Lane Kiffin is capable of doing and what we've seen him being capable of doing in the transfer portal from an offensive perspective, that really plays into LSU's hands a lot easier here when you talk about making a playoff run or a championship run in what could have been what will be Weeks' last year if he decides to return. So Lots still to figure out here. LSU's got 7 transfer portal guys who are going to be entering the portal on January 2nd. You would imagine that more are on the way here over the next couple weeks as they continue to prepare for this bowl game against Houston on December the 27th. We're going to have everything broken down for you guys at that time. So just wanted to hop on here and talk about Frank Wilson and talk about that departure and what that now means for LSU and where they can turn going forward. So I think at the end of the day, that's going to be Kevin Smith. And, in an ideal world, Kawan Lacey follows Kevin Smith to Baton Rouge as well and really kind of solidifies that position, I think, from a top tier standpoint in terms of who's going to be your starter, who's going to be your big bell cow running back next year. If that plays out that way, I think you suffer or you get past the sting of losing Frank Wilson and potentially Harlan Berry or Caden Durham as well, because those are going to be 2 guys that have big decisions to make now with Wilson heading to Ole Miss as well. So with that, we'll get out of here. I appreciate you guys listening and following along. Please continue to do so. With that, I'm Glen West, and thank you for tuning in today. We'll talk to you soon.